Hi, I'm Loren Terveen.
And I'm Joe Konstan. We're faculty at the Group Lens Research Group at the University of Minnesota, and we work in recommender systems. In fact, we've worked in recommender systems for more than 25 years, looking at how these systems can personalize the content people explore, mostly in online spaces. If you're not familiar with recommender systems, you certainly use them. If you shop at a site like Amazon or even Walmart, there's a system out there suggesting products you might like. If you browse for videos on Netflix, it's a recommender system that's suggesting which videos it might suggest you'd enjoy watching. Or if you're using Google News or any of the other personalized news sites, it's a recommender system or a set of them that are picking the news that they think you'd like to see. Facebook, Twitter, they all use recommender systems. And we're delighted here to be presenting our review article, a survey that's looking at human-centered recommender systems from their beginnings through the opportunities that exist today. So, Loren, why don't we start with the question, what exactly are human-centered recommender systems?
Well, I would say that human-centered recommender systems are systems that keep squarely in mind the fact that people have to make sense of the recommendations. Initially, they have to express to the system what are their preferences, what are their interests, and they have to be able to do this through the system quickly and easily and accurately. And then they have to be able to make sense of the recommendations, perhaps choose among a set, evaluate why they're being offered to them, and decide which one, if any of them, actually meets their preferences and goals, and if not, be able to iteratively dialogue with the system to find something that is satisfactory. And they may even need to think about how they're going to use the recommendation, perhaps in a particular context or with different people. So, once I've said that, Joe, wouldn't it make sense that all recommender systems work has to be human-centered?
Well, I think at the beginning it all was. If you look at the recommender systems work in the very beginning of the field in the mid-90s, this was work coming out of the intersection of artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction, and people built systems that explored how do we make useful recommendations. They studied algorithms, they studied machine learning, but they studied interaction, they studied human decision-making. They looked at questions of how do we explain these recommendations? Are they better if we give people a more diverse list versus a less diverse list? Is it more effective to have people explore the recommender space interactively with feedback as they're getting suggestions? And all sorts of other questions that built up frameworks and ideas that were tested on people and that introduced a whole different vocabulary of ways of thinking about recommendations, about diversity and serendipity and unexpectedness. But then something happened. Back in the early 2000s, a lot of people got interested in recommender systems primarily as a machine learning problem. This was the same era in which Netflix had its $1 million Netflix prize competition, and many of the recommender systems research efforts at that time were targeted at what I would call matrix completion. Here's a matrix of values of what people thought about particular items. Can you fill in the missing values? Which, if those missing values were what they thought about items they've never seen, could be useful. But all too often, they adopted a standard machine learning approach of saying, why don't we estimate some of the values we have that we cover up from the others? And in doing so, they lost sight of the fact that the first goal of a recommender system is to be useful. And all too often, the recommendations that came out of that type of optimization process were optimizing for things that were obvious, things the user would have found without the recommender at all, and completely ignored questions of diversity, serendipity, understandability, or interaction. This is understandable. It's much easier to have lots of people doing research with an offline data set trying to optimize the algorithms. But at the same time, those of us who felt strongly about the human-centered part of the field have continued to push back, even when we were a small part of the research going on, and looked forward to the time when folks would both recognize that small improvements weren't adding very much anymore, and have the technical capacity to implement more interesting and more interactive recommender techniques in their research. Which brings me to the question, so what's exciting now?
Well, Joe, I think you sort of hinted at what's exciting, namely that we now are carrying out sound scientific studies to determine with people which of these factors, which of these aspects of the performance of recommender systems that can be optimized for, which of those actually matter to people. To what extent does prediction accuracy? To what extent diversity, novelty, and so on? When do they matter to people? And fortunately, we now have algorithms that can be optimized to optimize for those factors that actually matter. So I think that's very exciting, this combination of sound scientific methods to understand what matters to people, and then algorithms that can be optimized to produce that. And perhaps a bit more generally, I think it's important to think about the broader context of intelligence systems that encompasses recommender systems, where people have become aware of the ethical implications of these systems, the impact of their predictions and recommendations on the people who use them and on the people who are affected by them. So we worry and are concerned about issues like fairness and look at how our algorithms can actually respect these values that we care about. So I think those are some of the exciting things that are happening today in the field of human-centered recommender systems.
So we hope you enjoy this survey article, and we hope you enjoy human-centered AI research going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.